Coming up, a dentist charged in connection with a Floyd County murder case wants to return to work.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 11.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. We are seeing a break in the rain right now, but more strong storms and heavy rain is possible this weekend. That's why it's a first alert weather day. Meteorologist Eric Dean tells us what to look out for on Saturday. Eric.
That's right. Good evening, Steve. Good evening, everybody. And as you mentioned, we do have a break in the rain at this time. The big story at this hour is the patchy fog. Take a look here at the latest with live pinpoint Doppler radar. You can see, for the most part, we are seeing clean sweep across portions of eastern Kentucky. I want to pinpoint a couple of locations to the north and east of Moorhead. You can see Moorhead is seeing a little bit of rain right now over towards the Flemingsburg area, and over towards the Carlisle area seeing some rain at this time. Numbers for today made it into the 70s and 80s. 70s from Jackson to Clintwood to Pikeville to Grundy to Prestonsburg. Hazard made it to 75. That was the first time since July 1st that we had a 70-degree high. And then low to mid 80s from Irvin to Monticello down to Jacksboro. Of course, we had a lot of that cloud cover in play throughout the day. And right now, Hazard's at 68, Jackson's at 71, London's at 72, Middlesboro's at 71, 60s from Clintwood to Jonesville. And you take a look at the 24-hour temperature change. We are cooler as compared to 24 hours ago, and that's going to continue to be the trend as we go throughout the weekend. Unfortunately, we have thunderstorm chances to talk about, and we'll talk about that in the first alert forecast in a few minutes. Steve.
All right, Eric, thank you. One of the men indicted in connection to Amber Spradlin's murder, a business owner and dentist in Floyd County, has submitted a request to be allowed to return to work. Grayson Passmore talked to Spradlin's cousin tonight about what her family has been through during the past year.
June 18th, 2023 changed my life probably forever.
That was the day Debbie Hall learned her cousin, Amber Spradlin, had been murdered.
And she didn't deserve what she had done to her, because this could have been anybody's sister, cousin, mother, aunt. It could have been anybody. She was just a victim of being at the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people.
Spradlin was killed in the home of Prestonsburg dentist and business owner Michael McKinney, and 13 months later, 3 men were arrested in connection to her murder. McKinney and Josh Mullins, who are charged with complicity to tampering with evidence, and McKinney's son, MK, who is charged with murder.
Everybody keeps saying congratulations, and I appreciate that, but this is just the beginning of a long road ahead of us. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of motions and court hearings.
Michael McKinney has asked to be allowed to return to work. He was released from jail on a $250,000 cash bond after his arrest, but he was placed on home incarceration. McKinney was also suspended from practicing dentistry, but his motion argues that his work and oversights are essential for the business, and says he's still allowed to manage the practice. Hall and her family will be present in court on Monday morning when his motion is set to be heard, as they will for every hearing after.
Amber was just such a huge part of our family and someone I talked to every single day. And so it's been hard, the hardest year of my life.
In Lexington, Grayson Passmore, WKYT.
The attorney for MK McKinney is also expected to appear before the court at 10 a.m. on Monday. Randy O'Neill filed a motion last week to dismiss the indictment against McKinney. According to court documents, the motion included supporting evidence linked to 3 case citations that could not be corroborated by the court. Attorneys for the Commonwealth are now calling for O'Neill to be held in contempt of court. He's expected to show cause for why he should not be. A man once accused of murder is no longer in jail after a judge granted him immunity from prosecution. James Thomas Morgan was accused of killing his stepson, Matthew Tosh, in their Laurel County home in August of 2020. Morgan spent almost 4 years in jail. On Thursday, he was released. The judge agreed with Morgan's claims that it was self-defense, but Tosh's mother does not.
As for him stating my son charged him, he wasn't. Massey was behind me. He kind of leaned a little bit against the wall when I was in there.
Morgan's attorney initially said that Morgan was going to say more about this, but he could not be reached today. 34 years after the murder of her daughter, Janice Bailey is still looking for answers. On August 16, 1990, 21-year-old Jennifer Bailey went for a jog. Days later, she was found strangled to death. Since then, there have been no arrests. Janice says Jennifer meant the world to her.
She was my baby girl. She was 22 when she was buried. She was my sweetheart. When she went to work every morning, she'd say, "Bye, Mom, I love you. See you at 5 o'clock." Had a little card pulling out there at 5 o'clock.
Bailey says she wants the person or persons responsible to feel the pain she has felt for nearly 3.5 decades. Officials say if you have any information about the case, call state police at 606-573-3131. We now know who died in a crash this afternoon in Harlan County. It happened on US 119 near Mosley Lane in the Ross Point community. A deputy coroner says 69-year-old James Hall of Putney was killed in the two-vehicle crash. State police are investigating and have not released any other information. A man was hit and killed in a crash in Laurel County this morning. According to the Laurel County Sheriff's Office, the victim is 47-year-old James Zio of Corbin. The crash happened early this morning on I-75 South at the 29-mile marker. The coroner says Zio was trying to walk across the interstate when he was hit and killed. No charges have been filed. Law enforcement agencies in the Bluegrass are joining the national effort to prevent impaired driving. The Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over campaign runs through September 2nd. If you have a drink, they are asking you to plan ahead. Officials recommend having a designated driver. Police say they do not want to see more tragic outcomes.
Absolutely heartbreaking. I've worked several of those where it involved an impaired driver and where it took the life of an innocent bystander, innocent motorist that had no idea what was coming.
Last year in Kentucky, there were 4,324 crashes involving an impaired driver, resulting in more than 2,000 injuries and 181 deaths. Yesterday, Governor Beshear announced some counties in eastern Kentucky will receive millions of dollars in funding to help with flood relief efforts. The governor also provided an update on another project in Breathitt County. Nearly $50 million will improve a stretch of Kentucky 15 and further stabilize Panbowl Dam. Judge Executive Jeff Noble says the work has already started and this will make traveling safer for people in the community.
Sitting here in this seat, I mean, that's my main priority first. Well, my priorities are kids, but the roads is the next thing, and it's just high up on the list that has to be safe, you know, and that's just going to make it so much safer.
Transportation officials say more than 13,000 vehicles use this section of Kentucky 15 in Jackson each day. The U.S. Supreme Court has issued a major ruling on a Biden administration request to enforce new civil rights protections in education. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected the request, which would include protections from discrimination for transgender students. The sweeping rule had been put on hold by federal judges in 10 states and is blocked in 16 states as part of other lawsuits, including here in Kentucky. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals voted to block the rule last month. Attorney General Russell Coleman has responded to Governor Beshear's call to vote against a proposed constitutional amendment that could impact schools. Amendment 2 would allow some tax dollars to be redirected to private schools. Supporters say it would provide more options for parents, while opponents, including Pulaski County school leaders, argue it could harm public school funding. The school district recently removed Facebook posts opposing the amendment following a warning from Coleman. The Attorney General said he values the governor's comments, but emphasized his role is to clarify and enforce the law.
My job as Attorney General, and he should remember this as a former Attorney General, my job is to very clearly spell out what the law is, and then if the law is violated, enforce the law.
The amendment will be on the November ballot in Kentucky. Vice President Kamala Harris unveiled her campaign proposals on the economy during a speech in Raleigh, North Carolina. The ideas, her first major policy pitch to voters, are aimed at cutting taxes, lowering the cost of groceries, and expanding housing opportunities for Americans. CBS's Willie James Inman has the latest on Campaign 2024.
Vice President Kamala Harris came to the election battleground state of North Carolina Friday to present her economic plan to voters.
Key to creating this opportunity economy is building up our middle class.
As inflation takes a toll on Americans' finances, Harris touted a federal ban on price gouging on food producers and grocers.
We all know that prices went up during the pandemic when the supply chains shut down and failed. But our supply chains have now improved, and prices are still too high.
On Thursday, former President Donald Trump called Harris's plan communist price controls, saying they don't work, but if they did, he would go along with them. During her remarks, Harris also laid out plans aimed at making homeownership a more attainable goal. She proposed up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for certain first-time home buyers, as well as tax incentives for builders of starter homes.
By the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class.
The policies we've seen so far presented from both candidates would on net add to the national debt. I'm hopeful that they will put forward more policies and more specifics that turn that around.
Trump holds a Saturday rally in Pennsylvania, while Harris does a bus tour in the critical swing state on Sunday before heading to Chicago for next week's Democratic National Convention. Willie James Inman, CBS News, Washington.
And President Joe Biden will be the featured speaker on the first night of the Democratic National Convention on Monday. Governor Andy Beshear will get some more national attention Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation. He will be one of Margaret Brennan's guests as they look ahead to next week's DNC. Coming up on Mountain News at 11, an unusual sight on one mountain roadway. Why a kangaroo was on the loose.
And we have a slight risk for severe weather tomorrow, and that's why we have a first alert weather day. Details in a few minutes. Stay with us.